Welcome back to a special edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite. And we have a special guest, Rivals National Recruiting Basketball Analyst, Rob Cassidy. Rob's going to talk everything Rutgers recruiting. Thank you so much for joining us,
Hey,
Rob.
thanks for having me on, guys. It's nice to see Richie's face again. I've missed it dearly since I'm not showing up in New Jersey as much as I used to. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you might not be showing up in New Jersey as much as you used to, but it sounds like you're showing up basically everywhere else in the country, especially recently. So it's obviously Rutgers has undergone quite a transformation over the last few years. Just talk a little bit about like the vibe check on Rutgers. Compare it to where it was a few years ago to where it is right now.
It's been really interesting to watch because we all kind of saw the rise, last year at this time starting. And it was like, okay, they've got a little juice to them now. They're involved with Dylan Harper. And when it really, really changed in my mind is when all of us, everybody that covers recruiting, was pretty much sitting at Hoop Hall Classic in Massachusetts this year. And out of nowhere, Ace Bailey commits to Rutgers. Nobody had anything ready. It's like, what is this true? Yeah. First of all, I'd call 3 people to figure out what had happened and why it happened out of the blue. And that's kind of when I think the message got sent with, okay, this has gone from a program on a rise to a team that can really make some noise pretty quickly now. So it's been fun to watch. It's always interesting when a program does this. Now there's got to be some results on the floor, obviously. But I think they're confident that's going to come soon.
Yeah. So one of the, not even talking about Ace Bailey, I want to go back a class and talk about Gavin Griffiths. Just talk a little bit about his game, what kind of player he is. I know after talking to Travis Graff, who used to work alongside you, he mentioned to me that he's like one of the best shooters in the class, if not the best shooter in the class.
The thing with him, and the reason he's ranked so high, he's one spot off of 5 stars, is guys with his length that can shoot the ball like that. And he's truly an elite shooter. He's not like one of these guys where people just call him an elite shooter. But if you give him an open look, it is going in. They don't come around very often. Now, he's got to develop the peripherals of his game, I think. He's not great taking guys off the dribble right now, but that can come. But, when you get a guy with that kind of length, and that kind of shooting ability and that kind of defensive versatility, there just aren't a lot of them, like in any class. So we have him right there on the border of 5 stars, and I think that's a good place for him. I think he can outperform that ranking if, his handle develops and everything develops around him. But, just on upside alone, I think it's a good ranking for him.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that a little bit. I know you mentioned just outside of 5 stars, so I'm going to blame.
That's fine. I'll take
one,
it.
Right? Because I think he was 20 before. Now he's 22 because I think someone.
You can blame. I can't remember who it was that reclassed. Somebody, was it Trent Flowers? Somebody reclassed in there.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the point is, it's not an insult to the kid at all. But if you want to blame me, blame me. Half my day, every day, is getting cussed out by coaches and fans. So what's another 10? That's fine by me.
Yeah, Rutgers fans have this eternal feeling of everyone's out to get them. And if you look at it, from a 500,000 foot view, he went from 20 to 21. It's like not like he was hacked off with the knees.
Well, that's the thing. You know who else
went from the edge?
You know who else has that complex besides Rutgers fans? Every other fan every school. It's great. Back when I was on the football side, we would really get emails that were like, y'all hate Alabama. It's like you had the #1 class for 5 years in a row. If we hate you, it's really, we've done a bad job. It's of hating you.
It's insane. Absolutely insane.
I want to transition it to the class of 2024 now, because that's shaping up to be arguably, and I think not even arguably, it's shaping up to be the best class of all time for Rutgers. I want to start off with the point guard of that class, Dellquan Warren. He's like a 6'1" point guard from Erie, Pennsylvania. You've seen him on EYBL. Tell us a little bit about his game and what you think Rutgers is getting.
There aren't a lot of guards in the country that play harder than him. He is an elite defender. That's his #1 defining trait right now, is when it comes to perimeter defense. He's not going to guard a 3 for you because he lacks the height. But when it comes to defending guards on the perimeter, he can do it. He does it very, very well. He can take a point guard completely out of a game. He's good at finishing at the basket, and I think that's gonna play well. He's a little bit different than Griffiths in the way that his game is taking guys off the dribble, creating for himself, finishing at the rim despite limited size. He's not a great shooter yet. That's kind of the last thing to come for him, I think. And once that starts coming in, he could be an elite point guard. I think he's got the peripheral skills to do it. He's got a little bit of mid-range game to him. He's just not a great 3-point shooter, but he's a good passer and a great defender, and you can build around that.
Who does his game remind you of, either at the current level?
It's okay. I hate it just because it's such I need time to think about this.
Sure.
I don't want to compare him to anybody, especially not any NBA players, because then you get into like today's day and age, somebody will find this clip and it's like, Rob
Yep.
compared Dellquan Warren to whoever, and then for the rest of my life, it follows me around on Twitter. So I'm going to let him be Dellquan Warren, I think. And I think that's going to be good enough for Rutgers fans to really like him. I think he's the kind of guard that can contribute in year one, especially there. And I think you'll see him do some good things.
All right, how about this? If any of our guys we talk about today remind
I
you
will.
specifically of anyone, just throw that name out
100%.
there. I won't ask you again.
That's good.
We'll clip it though, and we'll put it on.
Yeah,
social
make
media
sure
so everyone
and make sure to remove
out.
all context from it. So it looks like it looks like I say, Arius Bailey is Michael Jordan. Just
There you go.
please.
There you go.
By all means.
See, I've been making. We'll get to that one, but I've been making the KD comparison to him, kind of just.
See, that's the dangerous thing. Like, yeah, there are traits. I see it. I 100% see the traits. But if I say that, it's it's over 5 years from now.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
compared this his high school kid to one of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah. Okay. Staying with the 2024 class. I want to talk about Lathan Sommerville. He's the newest commit for Rutgers. He's a big man, but he's kind of like a mixed bag of traits kind of for a big man because he's a guard too, or what played guard.
He can handle the ball a little bit. Now, I'm not suggesting that you let him bring the ball up the court because that would be insane. But he has a little bit like in the last game I watched him in, his shooting stroke is not pretty, but he can make a three if you leave him out there. Like he will shoot it and it will look crazy, but he knocked down about half. I mean, he probably only took 4 and he knocked down 2 of them. So it's not like he doesn't need respected at the perimeter, but obviously his game is inside. He's a bully. Guys bounce off of him. He finishes through contact. He rebounds the ball extremely well. Great instincts on top of being like kind of a beefy, broad-shouldered, kind of a throwback big man. But like I said, there's some skills on the perimeter that are encouraging. Now, I wouldn't suggest playing him out there. That is not his game. But, it's nice to have a guy that can do that if he is left open or gets caught on a switch. He moves pretty well for as big as he is. I like him. I think he's going to be a great 4-year college player.
So he's the perfect fit for the Big Ten that refuses to adapt.
Exactly. He'll bruise. Like that's, every once in a while, I was telling you this off air, it's so hard these days. Every single big man thinks they're like a stretch big. I'm a 4, actually. It's like, well, no, you're not. And he understands this, He doesn't think he's a 3 or 4. He knows that, his job is to rebound the basketball, create extra possessions, and bully people. And he does it very well.
Perfect.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, you don't necessarily need to be a knockdown shooter, but the threat of making a shot has to be there so you don't get left wide open, so you can have good space.
There's a huge difference between a guy that isn't a very good 3-point shooter and a guy that won't do it at all. I mean, a huge difference. And he fits in the first category.
Absolutely. So he was a guy you highlighted in your top 10 performers from the EYBL circuit. What was it specifically? Because you highlighted the game against, it was Bradley Beal Elite, I think, versus the New York Rens, where it went to overtime and he was arguably the best player on the court. What was it specifically about his game though that really impressed you in those?
I think we touched on it there. He knows, he is very aware of what he is, and he is an animal about it. Plays extremely hard, and for a guy, he does have some bad weight to drop, yeah. But for a guy, some guys that look like that and have a few pounds of bad weight that need to get off him will lose steam as the game goes on. He seemed to get better in the overtime. He was not tired. He was not winded. And I think you'll see that out of some other big men in this class, like Peyton Marshall. Sometimes if a game goes that far, he'll get winded. That did not happen to Lathan. And he seemed to, I appreciate a throwback 5, and that's kind of what he is in a way.
So 92 overall right now. We're going to expect him to be 1 spot away from that 5-star.
So I will move him up a little bit, but hard to make a guy a 5-star that's, it's just not what the NBA wants. And you and I talked about this off air. People have forgotten, I think, in rankings that there's a difference between is this guy an NBA lottery pick and is this guy a great college basketball player? And I think that Sommerville is going to be a great college basketball player, but some people want to look at him through the eyes of, well, he's never going to get picked number 20. But are we ranking NBA players? Like, that's a big debate in this industry is, are we ranking draft picks or are we ranking college basketball players? And I happen to fall into the second category. Some people fall into the first.
Yeah, sometimes the good college basketball players are also good NBA prospects, and that's a good segue into the diamond of the class. I think he's ranked 4th overall currently. Ace Bailey, he's probably Rutgers' favorite recruit all time, given that he's like this ace recruiter as well, for lack of a better term. And he's just a total freak, yeah. And that's a pun that's been used a few times. I want to shout out Lex because she wanted credit for it the next time we used it. But anyway, just tell us about Ace Bailey. I know he wasn't on the EYBL circuit, but this kid was, playing with the athletes of tomorrow in the AAU circuit this spring, and he was healthy. So tell us about his game, what we're getting
Yeah, I've
from him.
seen him a lot in different settings and all-star settings against, high-level competition, as well as in games that he just completely dominates. What's been super impressive about him is the way he's come back from the knee injury. The first month or first 2 times I saw him after the knee injury, I was a little worried about him. Where is he ever going to be the same explosive dude? But he is now. It took him 4 or 5 months after, and that's going to happen. But he looks great. He's getting better at shooting the ball. He's always been a freak athlete, and at his size, he can do a little bit of everything. He's kind of a unicorn. He handles the ball very well. He's an incredible passer, and that's new since the knee injury. There were times where he was throwing the ball in the stands a lot a year ago, 2 years ago at this time. But the periphery of his game is starting to come along. He's always been a high-level scorer, and that athleticism and size is just not something that comes around very often. And, when you talk to NBA guys, they love it. They think he's a potential, top 5 pick. I agree with that. I think that there's a good chance he could be one and done if he stays healthy. We're going to see with him, but like I told you, that commitment story is just from a media standpoint. I was sitting next to Joe Tipton and Eric Bossy and everybody from all these networks, and you see collectively everybody's head pops up from their computer, and we're looking around like, who had that? Nobody, just not a single person. So then it becomes like a feeding frenzy of everybody leaving the table, going in the hallway, and making phone calls. And it was really something to behold, because that doesn't happen often. We know. Usually we know where a guy's going. Like, even if it's not out there, we know. We did not know he was going there, and we did not know it was going to happen that day. It was kind of crazy to be a part of.
So can he be that number 1 guy in the class? Is it possible?
Listen, he's got that kind of upside. It's not a good class either. The issue that I think may hold him back ultimately is Cooper Flagg might be coming in. That from every source that I know, it seems like Cooper Flagg is eventually going to be a Duke commit in the class of 2024. And if that happens, he's the easy choice to make one. If that doesn't happen, I think those 3 at the top with Bailey, Harper, and Johnson are a pretty tight-knit group. And yeah, I think there's a chance for sure that down the road he could be one.
Now, I know he's playing with athletes of tomorrow and they're not EYBL anymore. Does that kind of hurt someone's recruitment a little bit because you're not getting to see them against the best of the best, or is it because they're independent and it might help?
It would hurt if it wasn't him. Everybody's seen him against good players. It would hurt. It hurts a guy in the 50s range or 60s range where it's like, okay, he goes to BFE, Wisconsin High School, and plays independent basketball. We've only seen him twice against guys that are going to be in fraternities. That's not the case with Ace. I think that he probably won't rise to number 1 based on this year. But he's one that it's like I'd watch in the high school season because they're going to play a national schedule. He's going to be around, and that's when I think if he's going to make the move, that's going to be it.
Sweet.
There's a name you mentioned before that all Rutgers fans have been very aware of for many years now. He's the younger brother of Ron Harper Jr., who is a Rutgers legend. There's a lot of whispers that Rutgers might be in the lead here. Is that what you're hearing? And what kind of player is Dylan?
That's great. I think that he could be one too. The thing about Dylan is he's got a little bit of, I liken this to like Isaiah Collier, our number 1 this year. And they're not the same player, obviously. They play 2 different positions. But the thing they do best that made me feel comfortable with making Collier one is that even on the nights that things aren't going well with the shot, maybe you're not as efficient as you usually are. And Dylan is usually scoring in bunches. But even when he's not, you look down at it's like, he had 8 rebounds and 6 assists. And it's like, okay, he still impacted the game. He's a real smart player. He's got a mature body physically. An absolute scoring machine. When he's on, he can take over games. You want to talk about somebody that's proven himself against the highest level. He's played for the Wrens forever. They play elite competition, and he's always one of the best players on the court. He's a safe bet in the way that Isaiah Collier's a safe bet, I think.
Now, am I crazy for wanting to submit a future cast for Rutgers? I've been
Listen, I haven't heard anything that's told me otherwise. Now, obviously, Duke is. You never really want to, say that he's not going. He's rule them out, and I don't think he's going to Kansas, even though I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's either Duke or Rutgers, and it might help in the long run. Obviously the bloodline's there. B, Duke has publicly come out and said, we're going to take fewer high school players. That I don't know how that plays in the high school world exactly. Like, we're going to find out. And maybe they are. Maybe it's something Rutgers can use against him if they're recruiting that way. And I think everybody is in this day and age. I like him. I haven't gone out. I usually don't put in the future cast unless I hear something definitive. Like, I pretty much knew Bronny was going to USC, and I wrote a story saying he's probably going to USC, but I still didn't feel good enough to do it. If I put it in, it's probably going to happen. And I've been close at certain times with him too. So yeah, I think there's reason for Rutgers fans to be really optimistic about it for right now, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell us about the shockwaves that it would send through college basketball if Rutgers was to land, two of the top four recruits in the country, even though it's a down class, like you said, but two of the top four recruits in the country. Like, what kind of expectations should Rutgers fans have moving forward and for that
Well,
season?
immediately you're going to have to get used to every fan is just going to accuse you of cheating. Like that's just what's going to happen. I mean, that's just what happens. That's the next thing. When you start getting accused of cheating, you know you're recruiting well. It's like I said, I enjoy these kind of non-traditional powers getting these giant, massive classes. It's fun. I was on the K-State beat when they got that class with Michael Beasley, and they were the number one class in the country. And I was like, where did this come from? I was a beat writer for K-State back then, and that was fun. It's good to see. I think it's good for the sport. I like the parody of it all. I like watching traditional fan bases get in their feelings. It's just like it's fun to watch online.
Yeah.
I want to touch on a 2025 class guide too that Rutgers is heavily involved with too is Darius Adams. Tell me a little bit about him. I know I've seen him a couple times just because he's local and
he plays for PSA Cardinals. And he's another guy that's real battle tested. He's played for their 16s. I'll probably watch him this weekend. I'm thinking about I'm going to Dallas and I'll watch the 16s this weekend. He's really, for his size, he's really come a long way as a ball handler too. And I think a lot of people want to call themselves big guards. He can play the two. And in a pinch can maybe play the one. He handles the ball extremely well for his size. He defends every position on the floor almost. Smart kid at a great program. That PSA Cardinals program just pumps out D1 kids over and over and over again. And I've only seen him 2 or 3 times probably, but I'll be focused on him. I'm going to do primarily 16s this weekend, so I'll know a lot more about Darius this weekend.
Okay. Sweet.
Who are some other targets Rutgers fans should be keeping their eye on in terms of either players that Rutgers is showing a ton of interest in or players that are showing interest in Rutgers?
Those are I think we've covered the big ones, and I don't know if this is a Rutgers guy or not. I've always wondered what's kind of, you might be familiar with him, Richie, because he's local up there, the point guard of Lehigh, Jalen, what's his name? Short kid, Jalen Reed, also plays for PSA. He's unsigned. Okay. He's a little undersized, but man, I think he can help a high major school. I don't know if they've reached out or what's happened there, but I know he has some high major offers and he's just kind of waiting. He's a 2023. I have no idea if Rutgers is involved there. I don't really, it's so hard for me because I talk to so many of these kids where it's like, they'll give me their list, I'll write them. And then the next day it's like every school they mention, unless it's like a top 10 kid, is out of my head, unless I have my spreadsheet in front of me. So it's tough to just kind of throw out names.
No. So now you're in an interesting situation where you were covering football recruiting, you're covering basketball recruiting. We always hear the stories about how slimy basketball is compared to football. Is
it's the other way around.
True? Other way around.
And nobody has figured that out. I started covering basketball. I was always a basketball beat writer. They needed help on the football side at Rivals. I did that for a few years. Now I'm back here. But the shoe companies at least are like up front, right? Like whatever that like everything's organized. The money, even before, and at least it was getting filtered through like things you could track. In football, it's it's like a guy named Steve with like it's like a guy named Steve that runs a training thing called All Athletes Are Dogs Training LLC, and like and you don't really know who to talk to or where the money's going, and like it's the Wild West because the shoe companies tried. They tried to kind of harness this thing with 7-on-7 and sponsored 7-on-7 teams. But once they realized what was really going on, they were like, "Forget this. We're out of here." It's you couldn't imagine how crazy it is over there. Basketball gets the rep, but that is not. And maybe 10 years ago it was, but now the money that's being poured into the football side has made it insane, and it gets crazier every year, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I never really thought of it that way, but. Yeah, it makes sense because you need 85 scholarship kids in football.
Yeah.
Too, so there's just so much more money quantity-wise. Maybe the top.
Think about how many handlers there are with no shoe involvement. It's like, all right, every like little town in the middle of nowhere has some training company where a guy's trying to get rich. It's like, oh, that's not his guy. You got to talk to Jim at Dogball. Who?
Yeah.
All right.
The more you think, the more you bring it up, it kind of makes sense because there's a certain 4-star I reached out to the other day, and he's like, "Oh, I talked to my dad. I talked to his dad. Dad's like, no, you got to go through his publisher." And I'm like, "What?"
At least in basketball, it's like it's always the coach. It's either his summer coach or it's the high school coach. In football, it's like there's a publicist named Maureen. It's like, well, a publicist, like he's 16. What? Okay.
That's just so wild that you call a parent and the parent tells you to go through someone else to talk to.
Well, and listen, I will stand up for the handlers of the world because if I had a high level kid, I'd get him a handler. Because I don't know, like, let's say if my kid was a high-level football player, I don't know how to deal with this stuff. It's crazy. So I would enlist one of the many good handlers I have. You know, there's a place in the world for handler. They do a good job. They do help. Now, you can argue with the morality of it if you want, but they do help.
Yeah, it seems like Rutgers has had some bad luck with handlers, at least in the last few weeks.
Sure.
But I mean, it all balances out. I'm sure that there's some handlers that have helped Rutgers over the years that you would never hear about because you only hear about the ones.
Yeah, they don't want to tell you who they are.
That's true.
So you've given us, a good amount of your time here. Is there anyone else in the Big Ten that we should be looking out for that might not be a traditional power moving forward that Rutgers fans might
I'm
be,
interested. Now, I wouldn't say look out for them necessarily, but I'm real interested in what's happening at Maryland. Like just because the coaching change, they always feel like an underachiever to me. And I go through this with Arizona State too. It's like, why? Like, how are they not better? So eventually something's going to give over there. And I don't know if that's going to be this year or next year, but it seems like kids have kind of bought in a little bit to what they're selling. So we'll see. We'll see if it changes and starts producing recruiting results. It hasn't quite done it yet, but it could.
Yeah, that Harris Smith kid's
really good.
He's phenomenal. I got to watch him in Delaware, I think, this summer, and he
also just ends up with a bloody nose in every single game. He's like a crazy, like diving on the floor. It's like, oh, he's got a black eye. Of course, he has a black eye.
Jeez. I didn't see that.
Always, every game. It's like there's like blood coming out of one of his orifices at the end of every single game. It's like Colin Pine, but for basketball. It's really something.
Oh my god. I got one more for you, real quick. NIL. What overall thoughts? I know what the PC answer has to be.
No, forget the PC answer. This is what's funny about NIL. When you talk to the kids about it, they still act like they're committing a crime. When you ask them, like, ask a kid, say, how much did NIL have to do with this decision? And they're like, oh, I never heard of that. And it's like, come on, man. It's okay. You can say that it's okay now, but they're still head coaches. They're stuck in this world where they don't know what they can say. So they just have to pretend like NIL, never heard of her. It's like, we know it's the only thing moving the needle. No, it's not the only thing. I think the facilities probably still matter a little bit. And obviously the ability to win. And more importantly, the pros that you've put in the league. But like, if we're going to sit out here and pretend like the money that is not something that anybody's thinking about, it isn't the first thing, then we're all crazy. And it starts with the college coaches who, like, the reason they can't talk about it is because they've built their entire lives on, we want kids that want to be here, and we are molders of men, and this is student athletes. So for them to be like, we got them because our NIL paid them a bunch of money, goes against everything they've kind of built themselves up to be, so they have to lie. And when they lie, the kids feel like they have to lie. So they act like they've never heard of name, image, likeness still to this day. And I wonder when we're just going to drop the charade and be like, okay, yeah, they gave me a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, the schools that have these different hierarchies. So Richie knows this intimately. Like Penn State has football, wrestling, then basketball in terms of where their donors are sending money to. And then you have a school like Villanova or Georgetown, like these traditional powers that only have one place that they're sending money. So it's just like a weird kind of situation.
It's absolutely nuts. It's the Wild West, and I love it. And it's just, I don't know why we're all decided that we all have to collectively lie about it. That's the best part.
Yeah.
And like all these collectives, all these collectives are in the news. Like you don't line and read about Miami's, but you ask a player or coach at Miami, like I don't know what it is. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you haven't read about that.
I've never talked to Ruiz ever. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, man's gonna bankrupt his company over this, but no, that's just pushing that on its own. Like,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Nuts. So go through the publicist, go through an accountant, just to talk to player X. All right.
It's the world we live in, but I enjoy it, so it's good.
Yeah. All right. That's all I got. I don't know if you have anything else, Mike.
Well, where can the people find you? We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Cassidy_Rob because a person has Rob Cassidy and they've had it since 2009. They tweeted once looking for their lost sister, and I can't get the account. So it's Cassidy_Rob if you want to follow me there. And, that's pretty much it for me. You can find my stuff on Rivals on the national front page, and that's that.
Did they find his sister?
I don't know. There's just one. It's like just on here looking for my sister. If you go look at his timeline. And that's it. That's the end of it. And it was like in 2011 or something, or 2010. And it's a lost cause for me. So I'm Cassidy_Rob forever.
All right. Well, Cassidy_Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Rutgers fans, thanks for tuning in. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.